What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, I'll be going over how I like to organize my collection. Plus, the new wave of vintage collection figures have started coming in, so we'll take a close look at the brand new Darth Vader Death Star 2. Plus, I got some pickups to share, including some figures back from the grader. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 64 of Brett on Fett. And before we get into how I like to organize my collection and the new Darth Vader for TVC, I quickly want to go over some recent pickups I got, including some figures back from the grader. Let's take a look. Alright, so I got a couple of my figures back from Collector Archive Services, starting with this SK620 from Disney's Chandrilastarline. This is part of their Droid Factory series. This is that exclusive one that you can only buy in the gift shop inside their Star Cruise line, which of course Disney announced recently that they will be shutting down that attraction, I believe in September of this year. I really like the packaging on this one. I think it's way better than Droid Factory's, mainline figure packaging, and I love the color scheme on this droid. And as you can see, CAS gave me an 85 or an 87.1 to be exact, with subscores of 85 for the card, 90 for the bubble, and 95 for the figure. And I'll show you why I think I got an 85 in a second if we take a look at the back here. And right here on the side is a little bit of an edge wear mark, and in the corner is a little bit of edge wear. And I think those are the only two imperfections on this thing, and that was enough to bring it down to an 85, unfortunately. Not great, but not horrible either, and it's still a very neat figure, and it's going to be even more rare now that Disney is shutting down that attraction. Next up, I sent in my George Lucas in Stormtrooper disguise figure. This is from the Vintage Saga collection from 2006. This was a mail away, and it's one of those that came in a factory clamshell, and mine started to yellow on the outside after a few years, and it always kind of bothered me, so I decided to send this in, told them to take it out of the clamshell and grade it as an uncirculated figure. Well, it came back, and it's looking good. Everything looks clean. And the grade came out good. They gave me a 90 plus, which is pretty good, a 94.2. Subscores were 95 for the card, 90 for the bubble, and 90 for the figure. Now the problem is this should have been graded as uncirculated because it was sealed in the factory clamshell. I had never opened it. I'm the original owner. And for some reason, they did not give it that U designation. I think it was probably a mistake. I've sent them an email about it. They have not written me back yet, but a little bit frustrated. I'm happy with the grade. It looks great and everything. I just really wish they had given it that U designation as uncirculated, since that's what it was. And then finally, I got another graded figure, but this is one I just bought already graded. Got this one on eBay for a pretty decent deal, and it is FX7, the original Vintagekenner FX7. And he is looking great in that new style casing. And this one was an 85 or an 87.2 to be exact. And just a great looking figure there. It's very clean. I really like the packaging. And I needed him to go with my 21B. I had a loose graded 21B. Now the 21B I have was graded by AFA. And the only issue with that is that CAS's casing is a lot bigger. I didn't realize that till I got this one in. It's a little bit taller and it's a little bit wider as well, which is having a tiny effect on my OCD. I would much rather the cases be the same size, but it's not that big of a deal and they look great. So overall, I'm very happy with it and glad to finally get 21B's partner in medicine alongside him in the graded format. Alright, so this past week here in the US, Entertainment Earth started shipping out some of the new figures from the latest wave for the vintage collection, including the Weequay reissue, the Return of the Jedi Han Solo, and the Return of the Jedi Darth Vader Death Star 2. And I wanted to go over a closer look at the new Darth Vader. The last one we got from Obi-Wan Kenobi was spectacular, one of the figures of the year, and so I wanted to see how this one measures up. So let's take a look at the new Darth Vader Death Star 2. Alright, so we'll start out by taking a look at the card back. Now, unfortunately, my entire shipment from Entertainment Earth came with the card backs damaged. This was the best one. You can see it's bent at the top and it's got a crease across the corner, and the crease goes all the way through on the back. And it's pretty bad, but this was the very best card I got in the shipment. So this is one I will keep carded for now until I can get a better one. I did order 2 of the Darth Vader, so I got another one to open and show you guys. But what a great card back they came up with for this figure. It's a great image with the Sebastian Shaw Vader with his helmet off. It's an iconic scene in the movie, and so I'm just really happy with that choice. And there is the Vader figure in the bubble. I like the yellow figure pill in the background. It does help with that contrast, help him pop a little bit more. But yeah, this is a excellent card back. I definitely need to get another one that is in better mint condition. Now this is VC 280, and there's a look at some of the newer figures, including the wave that Vader comes with. But yeah, I really could not be happier with how this card back turned out. All right, so here's the figure loose, straight out of the packaging with none of the accessories added on yet. And he's looking really good. First things first, let's take a look at that head sculpt. Now this is a very good head sculpt. I like all the scars on him. It's done really well. And I thought this since the figure was first revealed, that the head sculpt appears to be a morph of Sebastian Shaw and Hayden Christensen. Now I know a lot of people think this is just straight up Hayden Christensen, but I really think it kind of combines a lot of features of Sebastian Shaw as well. And taking a look at the body, I can tell they have painted his chest plate a little different from the Dark Times Vader, and there's a look at his severed hand at the wrist, and that looks very good. The one thing could be better is if they could somehow add a little blue and red for the wiring, but that would probably be too difficult to do and make it look good. Alright, so next let's take a look at the various accessories that came with it, starting with this part of his mask. I really like the way this thing looks. It's very cool, and it just snaps on over the front. Fits on there pretty well. However, along the sides there is a gap, unfortunately. You can see the white of his face through that little gap, and so that is a bit annoying, although I admit you probably can't really see it from a distance, so it's probably not a huge deal, but just a little bit annoying that you can't get that side of the mask completely flush. But the back looks really cool, and the sculpt of that mask looks very cool. Next, of course, we have the dome part of his helmet here, and it looks pretty good. It's a very squishy plastic, and on the inside you've got the little indentions that match up with the top of the face part of his mask, which is really nice because then it makes it kind of secure very well. So I was really happy that they did that. And there it is. Now it does seem a little bit big, but we'll compare it to the regular Darth Vader in a minute. Now here is his swappable hand and wrist area, and the wrist just pops off very easily. It's snug, but it's easy to take off. So it's not loose, it's not going to flop around, but it's easy to take off, and it's easy to snap the new replacement wrist on there, like so. And then you take the hand and you just snap it in there. And that one you have to give it a little bit of a push to get it snapped in all the way. Once it's in there, it's all good. So very happy with how that all works. It's all very secure. Next up is his unlit lightsaber, and this is the exact saber from the Dark Times Vader, but it's a very good one. I love the paint apps on it, a lot of detail, so it looks really good. And there, of course, is the lit version of his lightsaber. Very happy with those. And that's all of the accessories. So let's get the Dark Times Vader and compare these two. Alright, so on the left here we have the Dark Times Vader from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. This was one of the best figures of the year last year. Great Vader. And the first thing you notice the difference is the chest plate. They did paint the chest plate different, as it should be for Return of the Jedi. He did have different color lights on his chest plate from that film. And the other noticeable difference, of course, is the helmet. The helmet on the new Vader is slightly bigger, just very slightly. And it looks like it's a slightly different sculpt on the face mask part as well, which makes sense since it was molded differently. It's a separate piece on this one. But I think the Dark Times Vader does still look better with the helmet on compared to the Death Star 2 Vader. It doesn't look bad, it's just not quite as good as the Dark Times Vader. And here's a look at them next to each other with the helmet off on the Death Star 2 Vader. And basically they complement each other very well. You really need to get this Dark Times Vader to have with the helmet on, the traditional Darth Vader look. And then for this new Death Star 2 Vader, you really want to have him pose either with his helmet completely off or with just the face mask on, because that's what makes this particular figure special from the last Vader we got. Alright, so let's just get this guy in some poses, and basically this figure shines when his helmet comes off. It's just a great figure, a really good head sculpt, and I really like the severed hand, and the card back is excellent. So this is really a really good figure, just not as good as the Dark Times Vader with the helmet on. Alright, so if you're a collector, chances are you know the challenges behind trying to display your collection the way you want to, especially given limited space. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to give a quick tour of my collection room and talk a little bit about how I like to organize my carded figures and display my loose figures. And it can be a real challenge, especially for someone like me who's pretty picky and a bit OCD about how I organize and display figures. And so I just wanted to go through how I do it and the challenges I face, and maybe it can give you guys some ideas, and maybe you guys can give me some ideas by leaving some comments on how you like to organize your figures. So that being said, let's take a look at how I like to display my collection. Alright, so first off, I just want to give you a quick overview of the room so you can get a feel for the size and how I've got my stuff set up in general. This is about a 12-foot by 11-foot size room with a small entryway with a closet. I use picture ledges from IKEA as shelving to display my figures. I just prefer this method instead of tacking every figure to the wall. It's a lot less holes in the wall, and it gives me more options, such as switching out a clamshell with an acrylic case, such as with a graded figure. Now, as you see, there is a window on the back wall, but don't worry, I keep those blinds closed all the time unless I'm filming, and I have a UV protection tent on that window. Most of what I keep on the shelves in here is vintage collection, but you can see I do have other lines such as Black Series. And if you look at this area right here, this is my poor wife's section of the room. This started off as this whole side of the room was supposed to be for her, but as you can tell, I've encroached around it. She's been holding on to her family pictures and other knickknacks, but I've been slowly moving in and surrounding her little area. Alright, so let's move in for a closer look section by section, starting here at the entryway. This is my little Thrawn collection I have all together. So it is a mixture of different lines for Thrawn. And then right here is my Tartakovsky Clone Wars collection. I love the Tartakovsky Clone Wars. And this is a complete collection of that particular animated series, minus a few repacks. There is the Black Series tribute to those figures put out by Hasbro last year. And then I had a little space left over, so I've got a few Tartakovsky Clone Wars characters from Legacy Collection and 30th Anniversary. And up here above the door, I have a little section of Bobafetts from different lines, from Power of the Force 2 and Power of the Jedi. You can see I got a tri-logo, Power of the Force 2, Boba Fett there. In the middle, I've got a couple of 40th carded Black Series Boba Fetts, including that SDCC. I love that one there on the left. And then down here, I have a few custom carded figures. This first one is a Boba Fett by D2C Studios from ICCC. And then the next two are Stan Solo figures, that awesome Iconicon Boba Fett, and then that Ula that I got signed at ICCC recently. And next is where I start my vintage collection figures. Now this is a little random miscellaneous section. You can see I've put the Obi-Wan Kenobi figures up here, but I also have a few figures from Solo, and I have some of my prequel trilogy figures over here. Now, just to let you guys know, this is not my entire collection on display in this room. I have got tons of figures put away in storage bins and a bunch set up in my son's room, who also loves Star Wars toys. I just don't have the room to display all of my collection. Maybe if I decided to just only display TVC, I could make it work, but I do like having a few other lines on display. Now that being said, I do display my entire collection of TVC figures from the original trilogy. And here we're looking at the Star Wars A New Hope section. And for TVC, I group my figures together by film or TV show and then put them in order by VC number. And what I'll show you a bit later is that sometimes that can be a bit tricky when you have some carded figures that use a Chase logo from one of the films, but they weren't actually from the film. Now here is my Empire Strikes Back figures. And when I'm putting these in order by VC number, I go left to right for a particular shelf, but then top to bottom for a column of shelves. So now moving up here to continue on with the Empire Strikes Back carded figures. And then right about here is where the Empire Strikes Back figures stop and the Return of the Jedi figures start. And there are just so many Return of the Jedi figures, way more than the A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back figures even put together. I'm not sure why it's so lopsided with the number of Return of the Jedi figures. I mean, because this was even before the 40th anniversary. There was already way more Jedi, and now we just have that much more with the 40th anniversary line. And don't get me wrong, I love Return of the Jedi, but I'm also a huge Empire Strikes Back fan. That is my favorite Star Wars film, so I would like to see many more Empire figures get added to the line, as well as A New Hope, because there's just so many Jedi, so they really got to do some catching up. By now you've noticed I keep all of my TVC figures in Figure Shield brand clamshells, and that's mainly for consistency. I like them to all be in the same type of case, with the exception of the ones that are in acrylics. And the main reason I use Figure Shields actually start off because before I used to display my OTC and Saga Vintage Collection lines alongside my TVC figures, and those factory installed clamshells those lines came with kind of resembled the same style as the Figure Shields, and so I wanted them to look as similar as possible since they were displayed next to each other. Moving over to this next wall, you'll see I have all of my Rogue One TVC figures together, including the Rebel Fleet Trooper pack-in from the Tantive 4 playset and the Antok Merrick pack-in from his X-Wing set. And then starting here, I have all the Mandalorian figures, beginning with the 2 Razor Crest exclusive carded figures that I had graded. And here is the mainline TVC figures from the Mandalorian, and there are so many Mandalorian figures from TVC. This takes up a pretty significant section of my room. And there's the only TVC figure I have in a star case. That's that Mandalorian Maldo Kreese deluxe figure that was such a weird size. Figure Shield did not make a case for that size card back, but ProLogic made a star case that was originally intended for starting lineup sports action figures. Now these 3 figures, the Dr. Aphra, the Shadow Trooper, and Hondo Ohnaka, I have no idea what to do with. They're currently sitting here as placeholders for future Mandalorian figures. But the reason this is a problem for me is because they use a Star Wars Chase logo, but these are obviously not from A New Hope at all. These are mislabeled in my opinion. Aphra probably should have had an expanded universe chase. The Shadow Trooper is actually from Battlefront, so this should have been a Gaming Greats line and had the Battlefront logo on it, either in the chase at the top or in the bottom right corner like the other early Gaming Greats. And then Hondo Ohnaka should have either had a Galaxy's Edge chase or a Clone Wars chase. I do not know why Hasbro put out those 3 figures on just a regular Star Wars card. And then bottoming out this section, I have the 4 Andor figures carded, followed by the only Book of Boba Fett figure I currently have, Fennec Shand. Over here I have my only retros that are displayed in this room, and that is the prototype figures. I love the way these look, and they fit nicely on that particular section. Up here above the window, I have 3 of my favorite Lost Line figures, and then just below it, I have the 3 Droids animated series figures from TVC, including that Boba Fett that I got graded. That is one of my favorite action figures from my collection. Moving on to the next section, I have all of my Clone Wars animated series TVC figures. Now these are all the 3D Dave Filoni Clone Wars series figures, and they fit really nicely on this section of wall here. You can see on the bottom section I'm missing 2 spaces, and that is for Blitz and Colt to go next to Havoc. Down there I've got my autographed Cad Bane picture, and then moving over to this cabinet, I've got some of my Funko Pops in a really bad spot blocking the cabinet doors. They can't stay there. I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with them. And then on top of the cabinet, I've just got some random figures that don't really work for my picture ledge shelves. So I just got those kind of just bunched up there. Not a great way to display stuff, but just the best I could do at the moment. Now up at the top of this wall, I have my carded Black Series figures, starting with the Credit Collection figures, a few 40th Anniversary line, and those Clone Wars line figures. Then on the next row down, I've got all of the original carbonized figures, I've got some of the Publishing Series figures, and then I've got some Galaxy packaging figures and archive figures that are basically sitting there as placeholders. Now this was originally supposed to be an all Black Series wall, but then I started opening most of my Black Series figures, so that just gave room for more of my TVC line. So here I've got my Expanded Universe and all of the Gaming Greats figures on this shelf. And on this bottom shelf here, I've got my Bad Batch figures, plus the 2D Tartakovsky animated Clone Wars figures. Jumping over to this little section of the wall is where I keep my helmets that I have. I only have 3 so far, and I've got an extra space, which currently I intend to fill with the new Scout Trooper helmet. And then I've got this little section of blank wall that I could use. However, it is a curved wall right here, so it makes it a little bit tricky. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that. Now jumping over to my main wall where I have my glass tables, I've got a couple little floating shelves there. That one I've got my Yak face, and then that Vintagekenner Bosk I got recently. It's so awesome. Then over here, I've got my maquettes, and I've got my graded Vintagekenner figures, my original 12 Vintagekenner figures. Sitting on top of those, I've got my ESB Bounty Hunters, the modern versions, or at least my favorite modern versions. But I'm missing a loose Dengar, so I've got a Cad Bane stuck there in his place. On the back here, I've just got some of my other favorite figures from other miscellaneous lines. This is Legacy Collection. And over here, I have my animated Snowspeeder Luke maquette and my Razor Crest exclusive graded loose Mando. And then over here I have a couple of the special mail away Bobafetts from TVC. I really wanted these here because they don't really fit with the New Hope section or the Empire section, since that prototype Boba Fett was not actually in the Empire Strikes Back. Now let's take a look at my loose figure display on my table. On the Carbonite Freezing Chamber, I have my original Vintagekenner Bounty Hunters and Medical Droids. Those are some of my favorite figures as a kid. And then I've got my TVC figures just kind of grouped in here, just sprinkled together. It's a little bit of anarchy. I've got just so many here, and I'm just grouping them by film as best I can. And I really just need to figure out what to do because there's no more room really. It's just getting way too crowded with these figures. And I'm thinking about maybe at times just taking half of these off and putting them away and just setting up, you know, scenes or something like that and just rotating them out. I really need to figure out what to do because it's kind of starting to stress me out to have this many figures just kind of clustered together. So I'm going to see what to do about that because I already did something similar over here. This is my loose Black Series collection, but it's only about really less than half of my loose Black Series figures. I used to have this entire section of table loaded up, every square inch taken up by a figure just in rows, and it just got to be overwhelming to me. So I removed over half of them, put them in a storage bin, just picked these for now and just kind of grouped them together. You know, either Return of the Jedi figures here or a group of stormtroopers. I've got the Empire Strikes Back Bounty Hunters in a row there, and then just some droids grouped together, etc. And there's a probe droid in the back. So that's what I've done with my Black Series, just so it's not so overwhelming. So I'll probably do something similar with the TVC loose figures. Now up at the top here, I have an angled section of wall, and I've used this to display my Jumbo figures and my Macquarie art. You can see I've got my Macquarie Jumbos next to the Macquarie art, and I've braced these up there using picture frame clips for the most part. And you can see I've got a space left over for another Jumbo figure. I've got 2 on pre-order, so one of those will go there. You can see I've got a few hanging ships, including this Saga Collection X-Wing and this TVC Snowspeeder. And then over to the left side, I've got a TIE Fighter. I think that one is from Power of the Force 2. And I hang those vehicles with a strong fishing line. And the last section we'll look at is under my tables. These are one step away from having to go to storage bins. This is my 30th anniversary Macquarie figures here. I love those figures. And then I've got a bunch of droids. I got some toycollection droids, and in front of them I've got some droid factory droids. And then over here I have my AT-AT from the Shadows of the Dark Side line, as well as the Cloud Car. And then I've got some more of my favorite 30th anniversary figures. I used to have almost the entire collection of 30th anniversary ones, but I just sold most of them off when I got into TVC. And there are a few of my favorite Legacy Collection figures left over, and a couple of Clone Wars figures. And that is my collection room. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments how you like to organize and display your collection, whether it be carded, loose, or both. Thanks for checking out this video. Thank you so much to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.